Okay, welcome all. This is the first meeting for the feature testing working group. Hopefully, I created all of the artifacts that are typically created with a working group, starting with the agenda. And we can go ahead and jump in and get started. I've never actually used this format for a meeting agenda, so I don't know if anyone else has, but if not, we'll all experiment with it together. So we go from bottom up here. I have the first point then, just what I'm doing right now, welcoming y'all to the working group. I'm assuming everyone had a chance to read the MR and the handbook page. Um, and with that assumption, is everyone comfortable kind of with the expectations of this working group and the work we're specifically looking at doing here? I know in the MR there were some questions around like the fit of feature testing as a whole within our workflow. We're not really looking into that in this working group. We strictly want to test the feasibility of using a replacement to our current RSpec Capybara flow or tool set. Um, if we prove that out, then we'll start experimenting with, or we'll start looking at other things like the uh, the the designer, the DX for using this. Also, the time it takes to run pipelines and things like that. But that'll probably be a separate working group. Are we all nods or thumbs up, comfortable on the expectations and goals of this specific working group?
I have a question. If we find out that they are equally as bad is the wrong word, but if they're equally as poor with the current thing, what will be our recommendation or outcome from that?
Yeah, so if we find that they're equal as far as like the developer experience and the like everything we want to look at, um, I don't know if we'll want to. I don't know. What do you think? Um, I don't know if
I
they're
would
really looking for. Oh, go ahead, Natalia.
I would say that it would require spinning off the much bigger working group with a bigger scope because it essentially means that the problem is not the testing framework or the testing approach. The problem is monolith right now and how we run our feature specs. I
Yeah.
have a few ideas for bigger working group as well, right? We can consider
Mhm.
very different approaches there. We can think about more end-to-end testing, for example, and we can think about having dedicated test environment finally, properly, not running it every single time on every single machine on the pipeline, which is extremely slow. Like I'm willing to go as far thinking about manual QA at this point.
Yeah. There's like a big fear I have that browser testing is just bad, like flaky wise overall. It depends on your resources locally or your resources in CI, and that causes other flakiness because people just haven't figured out. We just haven't, as technology, figured out browser testing to make it non-flaky. And then the worst case would be if we get like, okay, they're both as not great. And now we end up with supporting both long term because we're never going to be able to like feasibly convert all of these old tests to the new way. So we'll have two ways of doing things, and then that'll add even more complexity.
Honestly, if they're equally bad, but if they're equally bad in different areas, I would be willing to have even more tools. Like, for example, if this particular test is flaky in Capybara, but non-flaky in Playwright, and I can prove this, I would better have both because unfortunately, as we learned from Plan, the cost of regressions is higher than cost of maintaining two tools in this particular case. And like, even if we find out that the Playwright is significantly better, like, I don't know. Honestly, I do not know. I need to experiment. We will still need to maintain two tools, even if it's like super cool and amazing we have so many tests in Capybara that will potentially stay for some time. There is not a goal to write everything from Capybara to Playwright. But we will see. Again, we will need some initial measures, and we can expect a bad outcome as well. That's the point of the working group. Let's experiment.
Yeah. The other working group, I think, will have, like, these are all data points that we'll have to take into account in that working group before a decision is made. Like, we'll really have to look at, whether the maintenance cost of supporting two tool sets or two frameworks, testing frameworks, are worth um, the the regressions, or the regression reduction that we may be able to get, or the developer experience that we may be able to get with adding another tool. Um, yeah, that is all, I think, out of context of this working group. And that one will probably have to be, like, the result of that working group, I'm assuming, would be a recommendation on what to do so that leadership, infra, and probably whoever is going to own those, like the maintenance around those tools, that they'll be kind of the final decision makers on that. But again, I don't think we're looking to really give a recommendation in this working group. We just want to see if it's feasible, to even add Playwright to our current workflow.
I do have a question. How will we determine if Playwright is better? Like, do we have a list of specific metrics we're going to track, or how will we determine if developer experience is better? Because that's more nuanced, or like a list of flaky specs to compare.
Yes, I don't think we formalized it, but I think we will go with a set of flaky, big, problematic, plan-specific specs. We have plenty to enjoy for the starters, like boards and work items and more of that. That will go for flakiness to measure. As for developer experience, again, that probably for me to document for Donald, but the main problem with Capybara currently is that the only tool besides running non-headless Chrome is screenshots, and it's very much not enough. And on top of this, we have live debugger that affects the result of flaky tests. From my experience, running a flaky test with Capybara, adding live debug just makes it pass. So adding an observer fails. With Playwright, there is a bit more. There is reporting videos, which is usually extremely helpful to see what's going on. And if we manage to run it right, there is also an interactive steps mode in the browser where you'll be jumping between the steps of the test and see the outcome. So, but again, all of this will require some documentation. So I will probably add on the developer experience, and Donald probably could be the right to look into our flaky specs just to measure on this limited part, because we definitely are not going to rewrite or even write additional specs for the whole code base. We need some area to cover.
Should we do that now, or should that be some of the stuff? Like, do we want to test specific parts of Playwright that we're struggling with, or we're finding issues with the current RSpec Capybara tool? Or
I would say yes. As for now, I mean, not on the meeting. We have limited time, and I would rather do this async as an action point from the meeting, like gathering some number of specs. I think Javiera also can help with this from the create side, because I believe create stages either first or second in the number of flaky specs. We have a close competitors on this unfortunate number. So we could select some of them and try to run experiments on them with multiple runs, right?
That sounds good to me. Yeah, let's do that.
okay, cool. And some of that might be formulated as we're experimenting with Playwright. like throughout that process, we may look and see that this is a part that is really complicated to do in Playwright that is not as difficult to do in RSpec Capybara. Maybe we should run more tests on this specific thing and figure out how to kind of make this approach a little bit easier, or see if we can make it easier in Playwright. And then we can define that into the exit criteria of this working group kind of as we're going through that. Desiree, is that okay then to kind of?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll define that specific criteria, but not in this meeting today. Okay. You want to take it over, Natalia? Run through
Yes.
what you currently worked on?
Yes, just briefly. So basically with Playwright, we potentially can have three, and I documented three different approaches. One is just replacing the driver in Capybara. So still running Capybara tests, but removing Selenium driver and putting the Playwright in it. Second one is running Playwright with RSpec. And third one, a bit exotic, is just running the full Playwright, which is Node.js environment, and having a dedicated test server where we could connect. This one is a bit problematic because what we do in our feature specs, we preset the environment in the test. So we're using lots of Rails helpers. From my point of view, communicating Node.js running environment with Rails is not trivial. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I cannot imagine the helper I would need to write for this one. So I focused on first two. Dropping Playwright as a driver is the simplest. It just looks very seamless, but not all the helpers that Capybara uses are available in Playwright and vice versa. So it immediately results in like 500 specs failing, and we cannot do it as a one-by-one case. If we put it as a driver, it runs it on all the tests. So that probably not the best case. And then I focused on the second. Let me share my screen and go to my IDE. I'm sorry for my extremely bad Ruby code. I'm not a backend engineer originally, so it looks a bit awkward. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting the Playwright, and we have a Playwright gem, luckily, that we can use in our Rails code base. We do a little setup Playwright method, which basically goes in the around block of the test and just adds a browser here. Most of the stuff is happening here. So basically, what we do if we import Playwright config only in the cases when we run the Playwright tagged tests. So when we are running our general pipeline, all the tests are run by Capybara. And if we tag one particular test as Playwright, this does what I would call in JavaScript an asynchronous import. So we only import in config if we have a Playwright test, and we're running it with a Playwright config. Not super weird, but one important thing to remember is that we are not running Capybara. This means that we do not have a test server by default. Like with this very simple config, it means that I will need to run my test server separately. And this will be the point for infra to think about when we're setting the infrastructure, because I would need some instance to access Playwright is just browser testing. So let it spin for a second. And of course, something happened. Like live demos. Live demos is always like this. Interesting, because it should be fine, but let me try it again. Worst case, I will run it on a different port.
Put a bundle exec on that, maybe?
No, it should be fine. It's like, I mean, I will, but it was just running fine. Maybe it's my GDK right now. It typically happens when you switch between branches. And fine, I will just not run the spec, but trust me, it passes Rails server is up. So nothing specific here. We just define the URL and it uses a bit different context. I would say that out of the box, it was able to record me a video with failure and a preset. And as you can see, for our Rails engineers, it's not extremely different from what we have in Capybara besides this part and this. I mean, the syntax is a bit different. What is good for our front-end engineers, though, is that all the syntax that is documented in the Node.js Playwright is pretty much the same here. There is a little bit of Ruby specifics like string interpolation and whatnot, but essentially it's the same test that like we would be writing it if we were writing the JavaScript-based test. So this config, I would say, looks a bit raw right now. It's not like it should be, but again, that's for the experiment. I think it should be fine. I would need some help if we would like to automate, if we would like to run the CI with some predefined tests that we plan to experiment on. For the initial phase of the working group, we will be probably running them locally on our machines. But for the real test, we would need to use CI because our CI is different, right? We are running it, I like to say, on potatoes, on much slower machines than our own environment. So from here, what I think we should do, I particularly plan to do, I will probably extend the test. Right now, it's just checks that projects exist and write something in Playwright that is the test from plant, one of the flaky tests we have, just to see if this one is as flaky. And for the first phase, run it on our machine. And if it's not, if on local machine is surprisingly a bit more stable, then we can think about how to run the test server, not Capybara one, on CI, and how to start measuring more tests. Let me stop sharing my failing Rails server. And do you have any thoughts about that?
Natalia, just to clarify, this was your demo just then was with dropping Capybara completely, or okay. And this is the one you said the first approach with using Playwright with Capybara was the one that resulted in like 500 failing
tests. Yes, exactly. Okay. This one is purely additional because this one is we are not changing any tests in the code base. We'll be creating new ones, tagging them as Playwright, and running them additionally in parallel with Capybara tests. So basically, it's right now, if you would run our CI, it's essentially the same CI because those tests will be run by CI just with the Playwright, but it requires a test server. So if I put this right now on the CI, it will fail, right? Because I have hard-coded URL of the test server that doesn't exist. If I manage to add it, it would pass.
So are we only looking at Playwright in the sense of when they're browser-based tests, meaning like they have a JS tag on them, or is it for all?
No. It's only for browser tests. Like I don't think that we would.
The ones that are JS tagged, which is okay. So only if the page has JavaScript on it that we're testing, basically, is the key.
I mean, no, in this case, probably I just misunderstood because I don't remember what we exactly mark as JS, but do we even test feature? Do we even have the feature spec if the page doesn't have JavaScript?
Yes.
I don't.
There is typically no need to put the JS tag on things unless they have JavaScript you need to interact with. And then, yes, it does reduce the need for having a feature spec at all, unless you're testing an actual flow through non-JavaScript things, right? That can't be tested at another layer for some reason, right?
I would expect those are less flaky, like non-JS ones.
They should be flaky for other reasons, and yes, like a really small percentage.
Yeah, so are we using the JS tag on any any kind of view interaction, any pages that interact with view, or are we?
They have to. They have to. If it has JavaScript loading, it has to have the JS tag. Also, won't load the browser, which is the whole what Playwright's replacing here.
I'd be curious to see how many specs use the JS tag versus don't today.
Yeah, we have ran into on review. I've ran into things where I've noted on review that you don't need the JS tag, and I've gotten the pushback that, well, I don't want to have to think about it, so I'm just going to leave it there for the future. So it's not a good measure all the time.
Yeah, like I never notice it being there or not being there. So that may be, yeah, we may want to figure out if we want to maybe default to having the JS tag there. Okay. Any other? So next steps, Natalia. Then, well, first off, should we decide now which way we want to move forward, as far as at least initially experimenting with the playwright and RSpec, or your first approach there, your first approach is without RSpec, right? So just completely replacing. So it'd be just Playwright and Capybara, versus the second approach would be Playwright, RSpec.
No, RSpec is always present. So whenever Capybara is there, RSpec is always present. It's our framework. So first one would be called like weirdly RSpec plus Playwright plus Capybara, where Playwright is just a replacement for Selenium. So it's nothing more.
Okay.
So this one, I would not recommend going this way because again, it's very hard to limit this experiment to some area in the code base. We basically would be running it for all the tests. We could try to conditionally replace the driver, but I wouldn't recommend trying that. It's not the same like that how I can see it. The second one looks the most promising because it requires probably much less work than running Playwright in any kind of Node.js environment. RSpec is here, helpers are here. We wouldn't need to reinvent the wheel in the test. We could just preset the environment the same way we did in the past. And it will be just writing things with a different syntax and seeing if this, and of course it's a different driver still. It's a Playwright driver and it's not a Selenium. And see whether this goes better. Yeah, Doug, sorry.
Do you find that the helper documentation for in Capybara for Playwright to be rich and easy to follow?
I mean, unfortunately not. Like none of the Playwright Capybara drivers documentation is any kind of easy to follow. It involved lots of experimentation to even make it run. I was trying to follow their guidelines and I ended up literally following like Reddit posts where people tried it and failed and tried something else.
This
No.
shouldn't be a deterrent at all, just something like that we'll need to like invest in type of a thing, because like Capybara has its own issues, in my opinion, with having good documentation at all anyways, especially when the Relish app went down, when the guy left that company, whatever it was, like last year, and their replacement for that is terrible. But yeah, something to think about.
I mean, Playwright documentation, like pure Playwright without combination, is pretty good. I mean, both Cypress and Playwright documented nice. And helpers will be the same. So I'm pretty optimistic about this case. And from my experience, Playwright addresses issues a bit faster. Like I was deciding, like trying Cypress, trying Playwright, just in which way to go. So it's not written in stone. Basically, if we decide that other framework, other driver helps us with flakiness and developer experience, and people like, whoa, Playwright is developed by Microsoft, maybe it's bad. It's okay to rethink this one. It's okay to.
Do you remember Phantom JS before the developer decided not to use it anymore or keep it? That thing was great. And then,
I know.
That was even pre-Cypress, wasn't it?
Yes.
Was it great?
It was great because it was lightweight and
Yeah,
like
that's true.
it was fast.
Okay, so
If
so yeah, are we good then with moving forward with replacing yeah, using just the Playwright driver then here? So essentially option 2. We all
I
comfortable
mean,
with moving forward there?
for me, yes, but I'm biased, so
I think it's a good starter because if we only need to backport with this new the current tests with this new syntax, then we can somehow validate if the problem is right now with Selenium, right? So if we prove that, then it would be faster for us to move to Playwright and just by backporting the tests that we currently have. So to me, it looks like a good idea. And if this gets difficult, or we saw that we validate that this is not working as expected, or it's not improving our test suites right now, do you think that do you have any plan B for this, like what we could do after, if that is the case?
well, that was also Doug's question in the beginning. So yeah, we will just have the material, right? The outcome. Okay, we tried this, we tried that, didn't improve at all. And it would be a good starter for, again, probably the next working group, because to me it looks like we ended up in a kind of feature spec limbo where we write them, we have significant effort in them, and we don't have the desired outcome with the flakiness and more quarantine specs. So it needs to be decided this way or another. If this way, like this way is just short and simple, right? We try it, we run the experiment, we spend some time and some effort, but it's not compared to rethinking the whole idea of our feature specs. It's just trying to like make a little quick tape fix and see whether it's running. If not, again, then we provide the information for the bigger working, like we tried it. It doesn't look like this solves the problem. Maybe browser testing is bad. Maybe we need to think about some kind of a different approach. And in my opinion, like any outcome here is really valuable, like, because nobody tried to do anything with feature specs for the last 6 years, as far as I'm aware, maybe more. And it's a good moment to see whether we can change that.
Okay. We are at time. Natalia and Javier, and actually everyone, if you could, like, taking approach 2, I don't know if everything that I've listed off in 1A through D is still required for us to test through, because some of those things we may get already included with using this approach. So if you could all just kind of review that and start thinking of anything else we want to kind of build and experiment with as part of this working group, just add it to the agenda, and then we'll figure out whether to include that in the exit criteria or not next meeting. That work?
Yeah.
Cool.
Can I ask you, Natalia, if you can create an MR or something or a draft to see your configuration and everything that you have already in place?
I will,
That would
I
be
will,
awesome.
and I will, and we'll add it to our agenda, and also probably we'll add a documentation about the tests and ping you there. So I will bring the plan tests, like what we want to test, and I would ask you to bring a few of create ones.
That
Okay.
sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, let's have a branch that we can all work off of for this experiment. Okay, cool. Well, thanks all. I will post the recording, and or I'll YouTube the recording and post it in the channel.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.